My name is Florian. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer of Intertrust. We are a Silicon Valley-based data technologies company. We're also very happy that today, Steve Wesley, agreed to have a chat about a very exciting topic, which is what are the implications of the Biden presidency on energy, transportation, and climate-related technologies. So for those of you who are not aware who Steve is, so first of all, he's a very, very prominent and well-known personality in Silicon Valley. He taught as a lecturer at Stanford Graduate School of Business for 6 years. He helped take eBay public in 1998 as a senior vice president of marketing, sales, M&A, and international. He also has a very interesting political background. So he served as the elected controller and CFO for the state of California, which in fact is the world's 5th largest economy. Steve founded the Wesley Group, which is one of the largest venture funds in the US focused on smart energy, mobility, and buildings. And Steve was also an early investor and served on the board of Tesla Motors. So Steve, good to have you here.
It's great to be here.
Okay, let's get started. Steve, I have a first short warm-up question for you. I mean, how do you feel about what happened since the elections in November? I mean, it's hard to even describe what happened. So what are your thoughts?
Well, look, first, I think the world breathed a collective sigh of relief that Americans came to their senses and voted Biden in. I believe we will now rejoin the civilized world. We will rejoin the Paris protocols. We will rebuild our relationship with NATO. It's going to take some time, but I think the US is back and heading in the right direction. Second, what we saw, it's a wake-up call to America. We've never seen anything like this. And what is really, I think, happening is the result that America, which has had the world's largest economy for many decades, has not done as good a job at taking care of the people who are undereducated, who ended up losing their jobs in the 90s and early 2000s. And those people were looking for cheap and easy solutions, and Trump was the first to provide them. So I think for every American, it was a wake-up call that we need to do better about making sure that we reduce the gap in income disparity in our country so that there are not as many people who feel dispossessed. But I am optimistic about the future. I think our economy is coming back. I think Biden will focus on the right issues. And again, I think we will begin to rebuild the partnerships that have made us successful over the last 100 years. Now, by the way, it may be a while before we vote for a presidential candidate with a German name again. I'm a little worried about that one. But otherwise, I think America's heading in a good direction.
Yeah, that's something which is interesting. Actually, I've been to the village where the ancestors of the Trump family come from, and they have excellent wine and excellent food.
Should have stuck to winemaking.
Still, I think we still have to look back a bit, and even if it's painful. So how much damage do you think did the last US government leave behind in energy and climate policies?
Well, I think it's caused damage, a lot of damage. I mean, by any standard, and I am a fairly moderate Democrat, but I think a lot of Republican presidents have done relatively good jobs leading our country. Trump was something quite different. He was someone who wanted to break our treaties, go it alone, and I think caused the country damage in a couple of areas. One, we need to get back into an area where we're working constructively with our NATO allies, our CETO allies in Asia, and redevelop those ties economically. Second, I think President Trump steered the country through 4 economically relatively successful years, but ran up a historic deficit. And I think, especially in a time of COVID, it's easy to continue to do government bailout after bailout. But at some point you must pay attention that this does not trigger inflation. So I think President Biden will have a lot on his plate. I do think he'll do an initial stimulus, but after that, we're going to have to do a better job of putting our own economic house in order, and I'm confident we'll do that. But digging out of COVID, it's going to take some time, and restoring our alliances will take some time as well. I wish the current president good luck. And I'm somewhat optimistic he will reach out across the aisle and try to form a bipartisan coalition whenever he can. Americans, I think, strongest when we're successful at doing that.
Yeah, that's good to hear. So what I take from this is that you think that Biden will be able to fix the damage, but it will take a little bit of time. So coming to California, we are, some of us live here, and, we've been following very closely on California energy policies. Also, there's a strong partnership between Germany and California. A lot of exchange between government officials around, how to reduce CO2 emissions stemming from electrical energy and so on. A lot of visits, a lot of joint conferences in the pre-pandemic time. When you look at the US, what role do you think can California play on a national level for climate and energy policies in the US?
So this is a really important question. And again, I've been involved in California politics for 40 years. As you mentioned, Florian, I was elected controller and chief financial officer of the state of California in 2002. And we had a historic recall of our governor in 2004 over the issue of runaway energy prices. And in the middle of the term, for the first time in California's history, the voters removed our governor, and all of a sudden I found myself working for an Austrian bodybuilder. So this is not what I had expected. But here's the punchline. It's best to think of California not as one of 50 states, but as a nation state of its own, the world's fifth largest economy. And the punchline is this. Western Europe is the global leader in smart and green energy policies. California is right up there with Western Europe, setting policy and regulations one after another to help move this country forward. And generally speaking, what happens in California eventually happens in the rest of the country. So it's important for the world to see California succeed. We've now had a succession of 5 governors who one after another have been a progressive voice on energy issues. And what happened in the early 90s is California set its first renewable energy standard to get to 20% renewables by, I think, 2010. And of course, the business community came out and said that will never happen. And we got there a year early. And our legislature came out again and said we will raise it to 30% renewables by 2020. And we beat that as well. Now they've raised the bar to 50%. This is important because to the extent globally successful economies like Germany, like California, like other European nations can show that going green is not bad for the economy, it is not bad for the jobs, that it is the future of the planet, and also is a job creator, that is a good thing for all of us. And I think you will continue to see California setting standards for rebates for electric vehicles, putting pressure on utilities to go renewable more quickly. At some point, I suspect there will be a ban on fracking, but we will be pushing the agenda to get to a carbon neutral future. And we're happy to be doing that hand in glove with the Canadians and the Western Europeans.
Excellent. So based on that, what do you think is the top priority topic for President Biden that he should address right now?
Well, the first thing he has to do is solve COVID. And I think, as you know, President Trump had his head in the sand. He was a COVID denier, said it was nothing worse than a bad cold or flu. And obviously, he was in denial. I think Biden's come in, made this his first priority. He said, you may recall just 4 weeks ago, I, as president, Joe Biden, will commit to inoculating 100 people a day for 100 days. And people said, 1 million people a day for 100 days. this was viewed as very bold. We are today in America inoculating 1.3 million people a day. Literally by next week, we'll be up to 1.5 million per day. I hope by the end of February, we're at 2 million people a day. That is job number one. Once we do that, our economy gets back to work and we can hopefully put COVID behind us. I think the next big issue will be a series of green legislative pieces of legislation that will focus in three areas: greener vehicles, higher green energy standards for our utilities, and there will be a massive push at greener buildings. Buildings, people forget, use as much as 40% of the nation's energy. In Western Europe, your buildings are much more energy efficient and frankly well built. The United States needs to follow Western Europe's model. So expect to see a green energy package passed by Biden and the Democrats. But here's the interesting part. Looking backwards for the last 50 years, the Democrats say, yay, on green energy, we're for it. But it's been hard because green energy is historically been more expensive. After about 2016, 17, 18, for the first time, we're seeing in the late teens and now in 2020, 21, where green energy is in fact cheaper in most of the world. So this issue is becoming more politically popular by the day. And what's hard for the Republicans is they've traditionally said no to green energy because they get their money from the oil companies and the coal companies. What's hurting the Republicans today is an increasing number of employees and jobs and voters in states like Texas, Oklahoma, Michigan, a lot of the Midwest are becoming wind and solar jobs. So you're going to see an increasing number of Republican members of Congress switching on this green energy initiative. That will be good news for the Democrats, good news for Biden, good news for the American economy, and frankly, good news for the planet.
I mean, coming to that topic you just described, so green energy and growth. I mean, playing devil's advocate here a little bit, if you look at the history in Germany, I still very vividly remember, so the German energy transition was triggered around 2000 by Chancellor Schröder from the Social Democrats. Yeah. And together with the Green Party, there was a coalition with the Green Party. And, you know, there was all this promise that, you know, yeah, if we move to renewables and we move to green, this will create hundreds of thousands of jobs in Germany. And now if you look back and you study the history, here's what happened. So a lot of money went into subsidized rooftop solar and solar panel production. So there was like an increase of employment in the green economy. But what then happened is that the Chinese government took a decision that this will be a core focus area for the Chinese industry. And literally, I would say they entirely wiped out all these German solar jobs. And, you know, on the wind side, it's not that harsh, the reality, but also there, you know, there were like a few bankruptcies and a lot of consolidation on the wind side. So, I mean, in hindsight, you know, this job promise around green economy seems to be like a pretty complex animal. So how do you think this will play out in the US? So, you know, do you think we will see short-term, long-term growth, or maybe the times have also changed? Yeah. So what happened in Germany is like 10 plus years ago. We have a new paradigm in many areas. So what's your thoughts?
So this is a great question, but you must always move into the future, move forward, looking at the future, not trying to drive by looking at the rear view mirror. And I think looking backward, you are right. Many countries moved too early at solar and wind. And I know Germany plowed through a lot of taxpayer offers with very little to show for it. The US did a similar thing. We made a big investment at a firm called Solyndra, and there's a big stimulus program, and some of these investments did not work out. But on balance, it's a smart thing. And there's important to understand the difference between the bleeding edge and the leading edge. I used to work at the Department of Energy for Jimmy Carter. And he was on the bleeding edge and said, the US, I want solar to happen. And he put solar panels on the White House. But the fact is, it cost $80 a watt to install solar then. It was at the bleeding edge. You could hope all you wanted for solar, but it was going to be a money loser and a job loser. I think Obama came in right at that transition point. But in 2020, and for the rest of our lives, green energy is the most cost efficient, and frankly, the most politically popular energy source there is. The missing part of the equation for the last decade has been there has not been cheap power storage on the days where the sun doesn't shine or the wind doesn't blow. That has been largely fixed because the cost of lithium-ion batteries have gone down over 90% in the last decade and are continuing to go down. And by the way, that is a great segue to what I call the Tesla revolution, because Tesla has not only evolved into the world's most valuable auto company, but they're actually changing the parameters of taking battery costs down more quickly. If they continue to do that, they may own the future not only of vehicles, but of energy as well.
Yeah, so we will come to that in a bit. Staying still at this, growth scenario, green economy growth, what will the growth be? Times have changed apparently, but I mean, still, since the election, I enjoy very much following US politics a bit more, and I hear a lot of noise around the fear of losing fossil fuel related jobs, which under the old government apparently has been a major political bloc. So how will the Biden administration address these fears and take people along so there is even a broader consensus for a green economy and a green future?
Yeah. So I was just looking at job numbers and preparing for this. There are more jobs today in the sustainability field, notably wind and solar, more renewable energy jobs in the United States today than there are in carbon-based fuel industry. This is unheard of in the United States. By the way, and I say this for my German friends to give you some historic perspective, when I grew up in this country, the top 10 largest market cap firms in the world, you had 6 oil companies and 3 US auto companies, and the 10th firm was either US Steel or General Electric. You feel pretty good about being an American. The rub is times have changed quickly, and not all of these companies got the memo of how quickly we're changing to green energy. Today, in the top 10 highest market cap companies in the world, not one energy company remains. All of the oil companies have dropped out. Exxon's seeing a record bad year. They did not see we're moving toward a green future. And by the way, this future is going to be fueled more quickly because when you have today almost 30% more green energy jobs in the United States and voters heading toward a 2x differential, that will move politics toward the green in our country even more quickly. This puts the Republican Party in a tough space because they're going to quickly have to change positions on this, or they will increasingly lose elections. And again, mark my words on this, you will see states like Texas that have largely been based on an oil economy switching over to a green economy, and that will change voting patterns in that state. And by the way, if Texas becomes a blue voting state, it makes it very hard for the Republicans to win a presidential election, but time will tell.
I was thinking that you might say then we all move to Texas because there's like this story that a lot of people from
we joke about that. The Texans say, "Oh my gosh, we're so much better than California." Another California company just moved to Texas, and there is some truth to this. It's just hastening the time that they become a blue state. We will see.
Yeah, I happen to work for a company called RWE, Rheinisch-Westfälisches Elektrizitätswerk. as you maybe can hear from the name, it was like a very traditional, over 100-year-old company built on coal and gas, and also a lot of mining activity. And I mean, what you saw happening over the last 5 years, that Germany relatively quietly decided a coal exit, and especially in the regions that are highly impacted, which is in eastern Germany, the Lausitz and the Rheinische Revier in West Germany, so the area around Cologne, where RWE operates all these mines. I would say, from my perspective as an observer, there was a lot of consensus building. There was a lot of, taking people along, and also there is a lot of money involved to compensate for this structural change. So I think it's a good case study to look at, how you maybe can get these transformations going in a relatively peaceful process that doesn't include, a lot of political volatility.
Look, I think Germany has been a model to move off a largely coal and nuclear-based economy to a much greener economy. I think you've done that in record time. I know it was painful, but I think Chancellor Merkel will go down as one of the great leaders in history. She's taken some tough stands, and she's delivered. The U.S. needs to go through the same painful process. And as you just watched in the election, it's hard. We have states, West Virginia and Ohio, that are wedded to the coal and carbon fuel past. But those states are, even those states are moving toward more green energy. And I think by the next election, this issue will have largely been decided once and for all. By the way, in the background, we're seeing this move to electric vehicles that is faster than anybody had anticipated. America has had a love affair, a painful love affair with big gas guzzling vehicles that Europeans barely understand. And the bigger the roar and the more cc's and cylinders you had, the better. That world's going away in the US. And you may have seen as recently as last week, General Motors said we will be all electric by 2030. And I'm here to tell you, they will get there before that, because the cost of lithium-ion batteries is going down so precipitously. So this world of energy and smart vehicles is changing faster than most people realize. It's changing for the better. Smart economies like California, where Tesla's headquartered, saw that future first, and it will pay big dividends for us.
Yeah. Excellent. So let's move on from the meta level a little bit into specific sectors, and we already touched some of them. So from your perspective as a venture capitalist, what do you think are the most promising areas for investment around climate, energy, transportation right now? So take us along the money journey, which is important.
Sure. And again, our venture firm has 15 of the world's largest energy and auto companies as investors. So it's everything from E.ON and ABB and Volkswagen Group Audi in Europe to Duke and Vistra in the US and Dominion to China Light and Power, or Tokyo Gas and Power, Origin in Australia. We've got a global investor base. And so I would speak for all of them in saying there's a few overarching themes. One theme is we're moving toward the electrification of everything, not just cars, that's old news, but the electrification of trucks, buses, trains, boats, and believe it or not, in the not too distant future, aircraft. Lithium-ion batteries will replace oil as the coin of the realm, as what the global economy will be based on for much of the next 10 or 20 years. And a lot of our investors are looking at how do we rebuild out this global electric recharging grid? So that's probably one of the biggest. The second issue, and Florian Kolb, you know this better than anyone, utilities are moving from a world of just producing energy to a world where they must manage energy. And we refer to it as the digitization of energy. And in simple terms, what this means is you will see in the future an arbitrage of power between the utility, buildings, homes, hospitals, universities, offices, and vehicles. all the time. This will create a more efficient, greener world. But you'll hear a lot about the smart management and transfer of energy for the rest of our lives. There's all sorts of other interesting areas, from green hydrogen to how you help companies green their supply chains, that are all important. But just note, we at our firm will rarely invest in anything that requires manufacturing, moving of heavy equipment, small margins. The future is in this digitization of the energy and mobility sectors, and that's where we focus. It's fascinating, and it's changing faster than people know.
Yeah, I absolutely agree to that, being exposed quite a bit to it. So what are the companies and technologies? And very important, I know that's very close to your heart, the personalities, so the people that will drive the shifts in these areas.
Yeah, well, you mentioned personalities, so let's start with the most, flamboyant, hard to have ever predicted personality of all, Elon Musk. And I've known Elon for over 25 years. He recruited me to serve on the board at Tesla. I actually was at eBay and began the process of buying PayPal from Mr. Musk, which helped finance what he's done in the last 10 years. And Musk is an extraordinary guy. He is difficult, irascible, hard to work with, a pain in the ass, but he is redefining the 21st century, and I think the planet is going to be better for it. What is so interesting, and I'm going to ask Ambrielle just to pull up one slide which really tells the story. I think it's the Tesla slide, slide 3, I believe, is a lot of companies literally up until 2 or 3 years ago were saying no one's going to buy electric cars. They were in denial. They did not see the cost down curve of lithium-ion batteries. Lo and behold, Tesla, and this is as of the end of the year, Tesla is now trading in the high 700s, has a market cap higher than Toyota, Volkswagen, Daimler, GM, BMW, Ferrari, Hyundai, Honda, and Ford combined. And some people say, this is a joke. It's all going to change. I think Tesla is overvalued, but it's really important to do a full stop here and understand Tesla got 3 things right before anybody else. First, they saw the world was going all electric way before Volkswagen and GM and the others, and Toyota is still in denial, and that is crippling their company today. Second, they realized that they were not just selling a car, a box, a piece of metal in a one-time transaction with customers, not to be repeated for another 5 or 7 years, but they understood the power of making every vehicle a connected car. And cars are now people's number 2 connected device right after their iPhone. And there are real questions about whether someday they might become number 1. Then by the way, the margin you get if you're Volkswagen on a single car may be $800 to $900. Tesla, it's obviously a good bit more portion. It's a lot more. But if you can start selling what are called OTA, or over-the-air subscriptions, and charge users $10 a month for this, that, and the other thing, all times 12, Tesla has figured out a way to increase the profit margin of vehicles because they understand they're no longer just cars, they're connected devices. Third thing is Tesla realizes that they're an energy company. And because they're not just putting batteries in the vehicles, but they're leading in battery development and are literally moving LG Chem, CATL, and the other battery manufacturers down the cost curve more quickly. Tesla is rapidly filing to be their own energy company in Western Europe and Australia, selling power storage. So there are many chapters for Tesla left to go, but it's an interesting space to keep an eye on because it's changing the world we all live in.
Yeah, I mean, coming from Germany, of course, our hearts are also very close to cars for a lot of people. Porsche, BMW, Daimler, Volkswagen, all these great brands, best cars in the world. No doubt about that. I sound a little bit like Trump. And I mean, what I personally found very fascinating, I'm following like the last 4 or 5 years, what's being published also in Germany, in the German media, the opinions about Tesla. And I remember very well that, every problem Tesla had with manufacturing, not delivering on numbers, was, at least from my perspective, like really celebrated in in publications. And I got like a little bit skeptical because I was asking myself, why are people so vocal about these failures? In Germany, we call it the Schadenfreude, which is something that is also known in the US. So I had the impression there's a lot of this Schadenfreude involved because there is this fear of this unknown thing is coming, and but we are so big, and if you look to the balance sheets of the German car companies, there's a huge amount of cash on these balance sheets still. So they felt very strong, and I mean, all of that noise has disappeared since he delivers the numbers he's promised, and with certain delays also the operational things he's promising on when to launch a car, even if there are some delays and some issues on the quality sometimes. And I think it's a very good example of the struggles that established corporates have in innovation land. I assume one day there will be a lot of Stanford and Harvard Business School case studies on at least those companies, car companies, incumbents that missed the boat to a certain extent. And I don't know, but maybe also energy companies, because as you said, Tesla is moving into the energy space and has the freedom to look ahead many more years than some of the incumbents that have to satisfy the return requirement of their shareholders every quarter, like in many other areas as well. So do you think that the share price will stay where it is, or do you think we will see some changes?
No, I think Tesla's share price is coming down. Great company, doing most everything right, but it's still overvalued maybe by half. But look, we live in bubbly times. I've been through 3 or 4 of these things. There will be a correction in the market. For those of you who are investors, there are still fundamentals. I teach at the Graduate School of Business, and historically the market trades at 13 or 14 time multiple of earnings. When you get up to 17 or 18, you're an investment advisor, you tell people time to put a little money in bonds. Today we're at 22, 23x. That usually means you're on borrowed time. And I think a lot of the tech companies that I love, the Amazons and Teslas of the world that have done things right, you will see them come down because they have really been bid up to extraordinary levels. But don't discount Tesla. They're still getting stuff right. There's one other issue I wanted to touch on, and I think about this a lot, and I call it the paradox of being number one. America had a golden age of cars in the 50s and 60s, and we made a lot of great cars then, and then we became complacent, stopped innovating, and the Germans and the Japanese passed us by like that. And that is the world we've lived in probably in the last 20 years until Tesla showed that Americans can innovate in the vehicle industry again. What I find quite interesting is that one of my favorite auto company executives globally is Herbert Diess. And I think he has been the rare guy who's shown he knows the ability to remake the Volkswagen company. And I think over the next 10 years, he might be the one who not only catches up with Tesla, but possibly passes them. But we're quite interested in what the Volkswagen Group is doing, in our opinion, far ahead of General Motors, far ahead of Toyota. Let's see how that smackdown occurs between Volkswagen and Tesla for the next 10 years.
Yeah. I mean, I think one observation that I'm having is that there's a huge cultural challenge. And here's one observation. So Herbert Diess, he went to LinkedIn to post on LinkedIn, I think a few months ago. And, what I read, he got bashed by some people. I mean, he has a lot of internal enemies, I think, in Volkswagen Group. But he got bashed just because he's using social media.
Yeah.
And well, that's the environment he's facing. So Elon Musk, we don't have to comment on his social media behavior. We are all aware that that's very different.
We spent a lot of time on this industry, and I think he gets it better than most. The fundamental issue is if you're an auto company executive for the last 50 years, looking backward, you wake up every day, you think about two things. How many units did I sell? And did I move up a 1/10 of a point on the JD Power quality analysis? That is no longer the path to success. Now it's moving quickly toward what is the in-cabin experience and how green is the vehicle. That's what millennials are looking at. I happen to drive a BMW convertible because it has a stick shift, and I love the ultimate driving machine. My kid can't drive a stick shift. No kid can drive a stick shift, and they don't care about the ultimate driving machine. They're happy with Uber, and they can't wait till we have autonomous vehicles. So a lot of the battle will be won by the companies that look into the future and make those changes more quickly. And increasingly, car buying decisions will be made by what is the internal quality of the vehicle, not how many horsepower does it have. By the way, I'm here to tell you the move to autonomous vehicles is happening faster than most people realize, and you'll begin to see the first ones commercially available on the street within the next 5 or 6 years. So there's some controversy for you right there.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to ask you. I mean, I know that you're invested in autonomous driving, and we talked about it a few times over the last years. I mean, when will this lift off, and what will be the impact?
So again, for everything we do, we look for the inflection point. Again, I'll draw just a picture in the air. When I worked at the Department of Energy, solar, $80 a watt to install. And the question is, when does it get broad adoption? And it comes down to 70, 60, 50, 40, 30. No one buys any solar in the 80s, 90s. It didn't really move the meter until solar got down to about $3 a watt. At that point, everybody says, whoa, it's cheap, it's popular, it's easy, and it's still going down. But at that point, after no movement in consumer buying patterns for solar, it doesn't go like this, it goes like that. And the point is, when you hit the inflection point, and by the way, lithium-ion batteries hit the inflection point literally last year when the cost for the first time gets down to about $100 a kilowatt per power storage. The big issue for autonomous vehicles is a combination of two things. It's the software, kind of the neural network inside the vehicle that reacts quickly. But I will tell you right now, we're essentially there for autonomous driving. The big missing piece is LiDAR. LiDAR is the function that is, if you will, the eyes for a car. And the reason autonomous vehicles would be better is human beings have two eyes, and they're generally speaking only look in one direction. With LiDAR, you can have forward-facing, back-facing, sideways-facing, and new LiDAR sees not 100 meters as human beings generally see, but can see 250 meters in snow, rain, fog, at night, in all directions. That is what ultimately makes autonomous vehicles more efficient and safer. The big question that's going to come up, though, that no one thinks about or talks about is who will own cars in the future. Because I'm here to tell you, literally within 10 years, the vision of taking your wife and children to the auto dealer and looking at the cool cars and smelling the leather, that's going out the window. And one of the issues is, if you're a tech company like Google or Apple, you think, we own the cars of the future. We'll be making them and owning them and operating. Now, if you're Uber or Lyft or Didi Chongqing, you have a different view. They think they'll be owning them. Some of the car companies think they'll be owning them. Some people will say the cities, municipal governments, or possibly the utilities will be owning cars in the future because they can build them into the rate base and ensure the lowest possible cost for the citizens. So the world is changing, and I will say the winner will be the ones that embrace innovation and are willing to take risk, My money is Silicon Valley does pretty well over the next 50 years.